Marcus Johnson stood frozen in the middle of his penthouse living room, his eyes fixed on the pregnancy test in Nina's trembling hands. The small plastic stick that would change everything. Nina's face was a mixture of joy and worry, tears glistening in her eyes as she waited for his reaction. But Marcus felt nothing but cold panic spreading through his chest. "Say something please," Nina whispered, her voice breaking. Marcus turned away, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city he had conquered. At 32 he was at the peak of his career. His tech company was about to go public, potentially worth billions. The ring on Nina's finger had been a promise of forever, but now with a baby on the way, that promise suddenly felt like a chain around his neck. "I can't do this," he finally said, his voice hollow. "Not now." Nina's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. "What are you saying?" "The company is at a critical point. The investors, the board, they're watching my every move. A family, a child, it's not part of the plan." The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but he couldn't stop. "Maybe in a few years." "A few years?" Nina's voice rose, disbelief coloring her words. "Marcus, I'm pregnant now. We're engaged. We talked about having a family. Someday. Not now." Marcus couldn't look at her. He knew if he did he might break. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." The silence that followed was deafening. When Nina finally spoke, her voice was eerily calm. "No, I understand perfectly. You're choosing your company over us. It's not that simple." "It is that simple." Nina's composure cracked. "What happened to the man who promised to love me forever? The man who said he wanted to build a life with me?" Marcus finally turned to face her, his expression hardened into a mask of determination. "That man didn't have $1 billion company hanging in the balance." Nina stepped back as if he'd struck her. "So that's it? Money over love? Over your child?" "I need time to think. Space to figure things out." "No," Nina said, removing the engagement ring from her finger and placing it on the coffee table with a soft clink. "What you need is to decide what kind of man you want to be. And I won't wait around to find out." She walked to the door, her back straight despite the tears streaming down her face. "When you figure out what really matters, you know where to find me. But don't wait too long, Marcus. Some choices can't be undone." The door closed behind her with a finality that shook him to his core. Marcus told himself he was making the right decision. That he would call her tomorrow or next week when things calmed down at work. That they could work something out. But tomorrow turned into next week and next week into next month. His calls went unanswered. Her apartment was emptied. Nina had disappeared from his life as completely as if she'd never been there at all. And as his company's value soared and his bank accounts swelled, Marcus realized too late that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. 4 years passed in a blur of board meetings, private jets, and hollow achievements. Marcus Johnson was now a household name, his face on the cover of business magazines, his wealth nearly tripling since that fateful day when Nina walked out of his life. He had everything he thought he wanted: money, power, respect. But the penthouse felt emptier than ever. The morning of the annual Children's Hope Charity Gala dawned bright and clear. Marcus stared at the invitation on his desk, remembering how Nina had always dragged him to charity events, insisting they give back to the community. Back then he'd complained about wasting time that could be spent working. Now he attended every event possible, hoping to fill the void she'd left behind. "Your suit's been pressed and the car will be here at 7, his assistant announced from the doorway. "Thank you, Lisa," Marcus replied without looking up. "Any updates on the Taylor acquisition?" "All set for next week. But you should know the event tonight. There's a rumor that Nina Barnes will be there." Marcus's head snapped up, his heart suddenly pounding. "Nina? Are you sure?" Lisa nodded. "She's apparently working with the charity now. Something about educational programs for underprivileged children." Marcus felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath him. 4 years of searching, of hiring private investigators who turned up nothing, of regretting his cowardice every single day, and now she was just going to be at an event he was attending? "Should I make an excuse to get you out of it?" Lisa asked gently. She was one of the few people who knew the whole story, who had seen him at his lowest after Nina left. "No," Marcus said, straightening his shoulders. "No, I'll go." The hours crawled by as Marcus tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to Nina. The way she laughed, the passion in her voice when she talked about teaching, the softness of her skin. And always, the thought of the child she'd been carrying. His child. A son or daughter he had never met. As his driver pulled up to the glittering venue that evening, Marcus felt a sense of dread and hope so intense it nearly choked him. The red carpet was lined with photographers, but for once he didn't care about the publicity. He scanned the crowd looking for a glimpse of her. Inside, the ballroom was packed with New York's elite, all dressed in their finest, champagne flowing freely as they congratulated themselves on their generosity. Marcus nodded at acquaintances, shook hands and made small talk, but his eyes never stopped searching. And then across the room he saw her. Nina looked even more beautiful than he remembered. Her hair was styled differently, falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She wore a simple but elegant blue gown that hugged her curves. But it was her smile that caught his breath, confident, genuine, and directed at the small group gathered around her. Marcus stood frozen, unable to move or breathe. And then Nina turned, her eyes meeting his across the crowded room. Her smile faltered, her body tensing visibly even from a distance. For a moment they just stared at each other, for years of silence hanging between them. And then a small voice cut through the noise of the party. "Mommy, who's that man looking at you?" Marcus's gaze dropped to the source of the voice. A little girl no more than 3 or 4 years old, with his eyes in Nina's smile, clutching her mother's hand and looking at him curiously. His daughter. The child he had abandoned before she was even born. The reality of what he had thrown away hit him with the force of a physical blow. Nina gathered the little girl close, whispering something in her ear before straightening up. Her eyes met his again, challenging him, asking without words, "What will you do now?" Marcus didn't remember crossing the room. One moment he was standing frozen in place, the next he was just a few feet away from Nina and the little girl who could only be his daughter. Up close, the resemblance was unmistakable, the shape of her eyes, the determined set of her small jaw, even the way she tilted her head slightly as she studied him. "Hello, Marcus," Nina said, her voice carefully neutral. "Nina." His voice cracked on her name. It's been a long time." 4 years, 2 months and 16 days, she replied, then gave a small laugh that held no humor. "But who's counting?" The little girl tugged at her mother's dress. "Mommy, is this a friend of yours?" Nina hesitated, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "This is Mr. Johnson. He's someone I used to know." The child stepped forward, displaying none of her mother's caution, and held out a small hand with surprising formality. "I'm Zoe. I'm 4.5. Marcus knelt down slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. He took the tiny hand in his, shaking it gently. "It's very nice to meet you, Zoe." His eyes stung with unshed tears. 4.5. The math wasn't hard. A woman approached, touching Nina's elbow. "Nina, they need you backstage. You're on in 5. Nina nodded, then turned to Marcus. "I have to give a speech. Zoe, sweetheart, go with Aunt Tasha to get some juice, okay?" "But I want to talk more with Mr. Johnson," Zoe protested. "Later, maybe," Nina said, her expression unreadable as she looked at Marcus. "If Mr. Johnson is still here when I'm done." The woman, Tasha, gave Marcus a cold, appraising look before taking Zoe's hand. "Come on, Munchkin. Let's get that juice." As they walked away, Nina turned to follow, but Marcus caught her arm. "Nina, wait. Please. Can we talk? After your speech?" She looked pointedly at his hand until he released her. "I don't know what there is to say after all this time." "Everything," he said desperately. "I have everything to say. Please." Something in his voice must have reached her because her expression softened slightly. "Fine. Meet me by the fountain in the East Garden after the program. 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. He stood in the back of the ballroom, watching as Nina took the stage to thunderous applause. She spoke passionately about the charity's work providing educational opportunities for children in underserved communities. She was confident, articulate, clearly respected by everyone in the room. She had built a life without him, a good one. When the speeches ended, Marcus slipped out to the garden, finding the fountain where water danced in the moonlight. He paced anxiously, rehearsing what to say, knowing no words could possibly be enough. "You came." He turned to find Nina standing a few feet away, arms crossed. The garden lighting cast soft shadows across her face. "Of course I came," he said. "I would have come 4 years ago if I'd known where to find you." "You didn't look very hard," she replied, her voice sharp. "I hired investigators. I searched everywhere. You disappeared. I changed my name back to my mother's maiden name. Moved to Boston. Started over." Nina sat on the edge of the fountain. "I had to. I couldn't have you swooping in with your money and your lawyers, trying to control everything." "Is that what you thought I'd do?" Marcus asked, hurt evident in his voice. "I didn't know what you'd do. That was the problem. Nina looked up at him, her eyes shining with tears. You made your choice, Marcus. You chose your company over your family. I was wrong, he said simply. So wrong. I've regretted it every day since. Regret doesn't raise a child. She's beautiful, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Zoe. She's perfect. Yes, she is. A small smile touched Nina's lips. Smart too. Stubborn like her father. Does she know about me? Nina sighed. She knows her father couldn't be with us. I never told her you didn't want her. I couldn't do that to her. But I did want her, Marcus protested. I panicked. I thought I had to choose. And you made your choice, Nina said again, standing up. Look, this isn't getting us anywhere. It was a shock seeing you tonight, but Zoe and I have a good life now. We're happy. As she turned to leave, Marcus blurted out, I still love you. I never stopped. Nina froze, her back to him. For a long moment she didn't move or speak. When she finally turned around, there were tears streaming down her face. You don't get to say that, she whispered. Not after everything. It's still true, Marcus insisted. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you in the worst possible way. But seeing you tonight, seeing Zoe, Nina, I'm still in love with you. And I want to know my daughter. Nina wiped her tears away, her expression hardening. You want to know her now that she's here, perfect and adorable. But where were you during the morning sickness? The doctor's appointments? The 20 hours of labor? The sleepless nights? The first steps, first words, first everything. Each question was like a knife to his heart, but Marcus didn't flinch. I can't change the past. I can only try to be there for her future. For both of you if you'll let me. The weeks following the charity gala were a delicate dance of text messages, short phone calls and carefully planned meetings. Nina had agreed to let Marcus see Zoe, but only under strict conditions. Their first meeting was at a playground, neutral territory where Zoe could feel comfortable. Marcus arrived early, sitting on a bench with a small wrapped package clutched in his sweaty hands. When Nina appeared, holding Zoe's hand as they walked across the playground, his heart seemed to stop. Remember what I told you? Nina was saying to Zoe as they approached. The little girl nodded solemnly, then broke into a smile as she spotted Marcus. Hi, Mr. Johnson. Hello, Zoe, he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. It's nice to see you again. Nina sat on the opposite end of the bench, her posture stiff. Zoe, Mr. Johnson brought something for you. Marcus handed over the package, watching as Zoe tore into the wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only a child could muster. Inside was a stuffed elephant, soft and gray with floppy ears. I love elephants. Zoe exclaimed, hugging it tight. I know, Marcus said softly. Your mom told me. The afternoon passed in a blur of playground games and cautious conversations. Marcus pushed Zoe on the swings, caught her at the bottom of the slide, and listened intently as she explained the complex social dynamics of her preschool class. With each passing hour, he fell more deeply in love with his daughter, amazed by her intelligence, her kindness, her boundless energy. And through it all, he watched Nina watching them, her expression a mixture of hope and fear that broke his heart all over again. That first meeting led to another and another. Saturday afternoons at museums, Sunday mornings at the park. Marcus learned to braid Zoe's hair, to identify her favorite characters from cartoons he'd never heard of, to understand that the blue cup was the only acceptable vessel for chocolate milk. Slowly, inevitably, the walls Nina had built began to crumble. She started to join their activities rather than sitting apart, watching. She began to smile at Marcus's jokes, to share stories about Zoe's early years, to ask about his life during their time apart. 3 months after their reunion, Marcus invited them to his home for dinner. As Nina helped Zoe wash her hands in the bathroom, Marcus stood in his kitchen, stirring pasta sauce and reflecting on how empty the penthouse had felt for years. Now, with Zoe's laughter echoing through the rooms and Nina's perfume lingering in the air, it finally felt like a home. After dinner, when Zoe had fallen asleep on the couch watching a movie, Marcus and Nina sat together on the balcony, the city lights spread out below them like stars. She wants to call you Dad, Nina said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Marcus felt his throat constrict. What did you tell her? That she should ask you if that's okay. Nina turned to look at him, her eyes serious. Is it? It's more than okay, he whispered. It's everything. Nina nodded, turning back to the view. She's forgiven you. Children are like that, their hearts are so open. And you? Marcus asked, hardly daring to breathe. Can you ever forgive me? Nina was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. When she did, her voice was soft but clear. "I'm trying," she said. "Every day I'm trying. When I see you with her, how much you love her, how patient you are, it helps. But I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared of trusting you again." Marcus reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I understand. And I'll wait, Nina. However long it takes. I'll prove to you every day that I'm not that man anymore, that I understand what matters now." Nina didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she laced her fingers through his, a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss. "When you left," she said, "I was so angry. I thought I hated you. But then Zoe was born and she looked so much like you, and I couldn't hate the man who gave me her. She saved me," Marcus admitted. "Even before I knew her. The thought of her out there somewhere, growing up without me, it made me realize how wrong I'd been." Nina turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. "If we do this, if we try again, it has to be different. I won't be second to your work. Zoe won't be an afterthought in your busy schedule. You won't be," Marcus promised. "You'll both be first always. I've learned what matters, Nina. The hard way, but I've learned." She nodded slowly, a small smile touching her lips. "Then I think, maybe we can try." Marcus felt hope bloom in his chest, more precious than any business deal, any amount of money. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. But Nina met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that tasted like forgiveness, like coming home. 1 year later, the same charity gala where they had reunited was transformed into a celebration of new beginnings. Marcus stood at the front of the ballroom, Nina beside him, as they announced the launch of the Johnson Barnes Foundation, dedicated to supporting single parents and providing educational opportunities for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. "This foundation," Marcus told the crowded room, his voice strong and clear, "was born from personal experience. 5 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I chose ambition over love, success over family. I left behind the woman I loved and the child I didn't yet know." He looked at Nina, who gave him an encouraging nod, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "But sometimes," Marcus continued, "life gives you a second chance. And when it does, you grab it with both hands and you never let go." The applause was thunderous as Marcus and Nina unveiled the foundation's first initiative, a scholarship program for children of single parents, named in honor of Zoe. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Marcus found himself in a quiet corner with Zoe, who was carefully eating her second piece of cake, her new party dress already sporting a chocolate stain. "Daddy," she said, using the name that still made his heart swell every time he heard it, "are you and Mommy getting married again?" Marcus smiled, stroking her hair. "Not again, sweetheart. We weren't married before. But yes, we're getting married soon. And we'll all live together? Forever and ever? That's the plan," he assured her. "The three of us together." Zoe corrected, her small face serious. "Mommy told me this morning that there's a baby in her tummy. That's 4. Marcus froze, his eyes wide. "What did you say?" Zoe clapped her hands over her mouth. "Oops. It was supposed to be a surprise." Marcus scanned the room, finding Nina across the ballroom, deep in conversation with a donor. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up, meeting his eyes. The question must have been written all over his face because she excused herself and made her way over to them. "Mommy, I told the secret," Zoe confessed immediately. "I'm sorry." Nina laughed, kneeling down to hug her daughter. "It's okay, sweetie. Why don't you go find Aunt Tasha? I think she was looking for her dance partner." As Zoe skipped away, Nina stood up, facing Marcus with a mixture of nervousness and joy. "I was going to tell you tonight. I just found out yesterday." "A baby," Marcus whispered, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We're having another baby." Nina covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" In answer, Marcus pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and gratitude he felt. "Beyond happy," he murmured against her lips. "This time I'll be there for everything. Every appointment, every craving, every kick. I promise." "I know you will," Nina said simply, and the trust in her voice was the most precious gift she could have given him. Later that night, in the quiet of their home, with Zoe asleep down the hall, Marcus held Nina close in their bed, his hand resting protectively over her stomach. "You know," he said thoughtfully, 5 years ago I thought I had everything figured out. I thought success meant money and power and seeing my face on magazine covers." Nina turned in his arms to face him. "And now?" "Now I know that real success is this," he said, gesturing to the space between them, to the home they had built together. It's family. It's love. It's being there for the people who matter. Nina smiled, tracing his face with her fingertips. You learned your lesson. The hardest way possible, Marcus agreed. But I got a second chance. And I'm never going to forget what matters again. Outside their window, the city lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the world Marcus had once thought was so important. But here, in this room with the woman he loved in his arms and their children, one sleeping peacefully down the hall, one just beginning to grow, was everything that truly mattered. He had almost lost it all through his own blindness. But life, in its infinite wisdom, had given him another chance. And Marcus Johnson, once defined by his wealth, was now defined by something far more valuable: the love of his family and the wisdom to know what a precious gift that was. As Nina drifted off to sleep in his arms, Marcus made a silent vow to himself and to her. This time he would get it right. This time love would come first. Always.